episode 17. So yeah, another episode. We've decided to do our episodes separate to when we have guests on, so it doesn't get confusing, because originally we were also including that in our normal episodes.
Yeah, we've had a few specials, haven't we, now?
Yeah, and because we're getting more and more interesting people on the show, we decided to keep those as specials, and this is the regular podcast. Now, you may notice it's being published on a very different day to normal. Quite a bit behind schedule.
Yeah, we're a little bit off the pace this week.
But to be honest, for a reason, okay? So we've been at Snetterton in Norfolk for the whole weekend, basically, training one of our junior drivers, Sarah Thompson, and it was her first ever race weekend. And when I say first ever, she's not done any karting or anything like that. She's always wanted to race in motorsport. Her dad did British GTs. He won a championship, but he works a lot offshore and tried to keep her away from it for a long time. She has other siblings. Yeah, well, she has other siblings that aren't interested in it, which is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But Sarah's always wanted to give it a go, and now due to COVID, he's working a lot more at home, and he's decided, okay, fine, let's do it, kind of thing. So it was a little bit underprepared for everybody, just in the fact that COVID really got in the way.
So hard to get on track, isn't it?
Yeah, so our big plan of getting her ready got very condensed, didn't it? Unfortunately. But hey, she dealt with the situation incredibly well, because she ended up only doing 2 track days and an ARDS before going out and doing a race meeting, which is pretty astonishing. I mean, I think, to be honest, as coaches, in an ideal world, we'd have rather put it back and done more prep. But now we've done it, actually,
she's kicked off. She's broken the duck, hasn't she? That's the thing.
Absolutely. And she's learned so much so quickly that actually, as much build-up as you do, you can't beat race time. And just experiencing the general way the meeting goes, briefings, dealing with competitors, green flag laps, race starts, all those things. We had a safety car in one of them, so she's learned a lot, and she did really, really well. So in qualifying, she didn't qualify last, which for us was just a massive achievement, bearing in mind everybody else on that grid has a huge amount of experience compared to her. So that was a great achievement on its own. And in the races, each time first race she knocked off 10 seconds, didn't she, from her qualifying, and second race it was like 12 seconds or something. So, really impressive stuff. But the big thing for me is, something we haven't mentioned is she's pretty severely deaf. And suffers with very severe anxiety, a lot of it to do with that as well. So it's amazing how much she changes when she's in the car and got that helmet on and that gritty determination. So incredibly impressive.
She wasn't phased by any of it. It's a couple of spins, didn't she?
Yeah, high speed spins, and just comes in and almost forgets to tell you. Totally
just cracked on with it.
Not phased. I mean, when I say she's severely deaf, she has had some serious surgery, hasn't she? So she has, I don't know how you describe it, but something that connects to the side of her skull that she can take off. It looks like a hair clip kind of thing, but it's an incredibly expensive one, let's put it that way, which helps her to hear, but obviously only partially. But the problem is when she puts the helmet on, she has to take that off. So she can't use her hearing like the rest of us would when it comes to revs and that kind of thing. So a bit later in the show, we'll be talking about feel and the importance of that with driving, and somebody like Sarah, it becomes even more important because she loses her hearing. So it's been a really interesting weekend for us, but that's why we've been delayed. But it's been great trying different teaching techniques, because obviously everything we do is very bespoke, but obviously this was extra bespoke because we've not had somebody perhaps in this situation before. So, but no, really congratulations to Sarah and what she's achieved. We've got a special podcast coming up, which will be launched on Friday, with a young driver called Ty Cuthbert. He has literally just turned 12. He's a massive Red Bull fan, isn't he? He's got a huge following on social media, and actually Checo Perez has already been in touch with him. So it's amazing how far the social media side can go. But what's impressive with him is his passion and his knowledge. Bearing in mind he's only just turned 12, his knowledge for the sport, going back to, 90s, noughties, even earlier in that at times as well. So we do a general chat, don't we? And then we've got a quiz with him as well. So which he gets potentially a prize for if he gets over 80%. So You guys will have to tune into that on Friday and see what you think.
See how you got on. Yeah.
But anyway, for the show today then.
Yes.
What's the crack?
So we've got our usual sort of mix. We've got a bit about cars, we've got a bit about driving, we've got a bit about motorsport, and we've got a bit of an interactive bit.
Yeah,
that's it in a nutshell, really.
So as we've mentioned before, we've tried to mix it up a bit. So we've decided to start with our normal topic of road cars, but actually technically this isn't a road car.
No, but something quite special. So
we thought we'd talk about it because there's a huge amount going on in the road scene that we're going to mention in up and coming episodes, but this happened to happen this week, so we decided to mention it, and that's Richard Burns's 2000 rally car, isn't it?
Yes.
It's just sold for, what is it, £610,000. So tell us a bit about that.
So this was the last of the almost traditional shaped Subaru Imprezas, the 3 box shapes, and it was the best looking one. It was the 2-door wide arch, really aggressive, cool looking thing, blue gold wheels, all that kind of stuff. But what's unique about it? Richard Burns won the 2000 Rally GB in this car, but it was already sold. So as it rolled off the finish ramp, covered in champagne and everything else, it went into a trailer and offered to somebody's collection. So it is absolutely as it was when it finished the 2000 Rally GB.
And it still is now,
it's
isn't
incredible.
it?
Yeah, it's got the mobile phone in it, it's got the headphones, it's even got cereal bars in it from 2000, you know?
And like pace notes.
It's all knackered down one side.
It's got everything as it was.
All the road books, all the pace notes.
What's interesting is the guy who originally purchased it has left it as it was, and now somebody new has come in. I don't really know the story behind why this chap's
why it's been sold or why it's been, because it disappeared. Nobody saw it. It vanished apparently.
And it's just sold for 610,000. But what's so great about it is that the heritage and history of that car has been untouched, so it's very much as it was, and there's some pictures online with it, and it's fascinating going through and seeing it's literally the guys have jumped out the car and that's it. All the evidence of everything that happened is still there in that car. And this is the
20th anniversary of Richard Burns winning the World Championship, isn't it?
And obviously the story of Richard Burns unfortunately it was a brain tumour he had, wasn't it? And died far too young.
Well, exactly to the day, 4 years after he won the World Championship, he died.
Which is and it all started with early signs, wasn't it, where his co-driver noticed some
well, they had some poor results. It sounds simple, but he was as good as anybody. And he had a couple of poor results which were unexplained. And then I think the rally before Rally GB, I'm not sure which round that was, every time they finished the stage he got out of the car and he was ill. And Robert Reed, his co-driver, flagged this up to Richard's trainer. Said something's not right here. And then going to the Rally GB start in Wales, he was driving with Marco Martin, the Ford works driver, and he blacked out. And that was it. That was the last time he drove.
And but even before that, Richard Burns was saying, I can't understand the pace notes.
That's right. Understand. Yeah, he did say that.
And he said, it's not you, it's me. I can't make sense of what, So there was a lot of signs, and unfortunately he went downhill. But that makes these cars even more special in some respects, because unfortunately Richard's not around to tell the tale anymore of these cars, and it's actually lovely that it has been left as it was in a way.
Because the funny thing, there's only ever been 2 British World Rally Champions, and they both died young.
Very different reasons, but
Elvin Evans might not want to win it.
But just to establish, this car isn't the championship winning year car, is it? Because that was the following season. 2001, we believe.
When you went to the ugly car.
Well, I don't think it's that ugly, but it became a bit more squared. In comparison, it had much softer lines before. So we thought we'd talk about that just because it's such an interesting thing. Sorry, you may have to excuse noises. It's
a very hot day, so we have the door open.
So if you hear any dogs, it's not
the neighbourhood dogs are out.
So that's it from the road car / race car in this situation.
Well, they drove on the road. It was road registered.
As well. So
So topic number 2 then. We thought we'd talk about driving, and the topic we're going to talk about this week is how to develop feel for what the car's doing. And the reason we wanted to talk about this was on the back of the stuff that we did with Sarah over the weekend, really, wasn't it? That there's a lot of emphasis in motorsport on using data and using an engineer that you must do it this way. But the problem is that you can look at something on a graph till you're blue in the face, but what does that feel like to you as a driver?
And I have to say, we're not anti-data. I mean, I learned when I was doing Formula 3, data helped me massively, especially with teammates and things, because sometimes it would help you recognise, this is the corner I need to focus on and so on. But I think data should be used alongside, certainly people on the way up until they're really established. It should be used alongside a driver coach as well, like any sport really, where there's still a coach there. And the thing is with driving is the goalposts move all the time, and you need to understand in and out, like with the car, as if it's an extension of you as such. So you really understand what the car is telling you, the car understands you, and you're very much at one with the car. And one thing with data is it won't necessarily tell you that. It will be very black and white and say, well, you're losing time here, or you're braking 10 metres early, or whatever it might be. But when it comes to getting that car right on the edge, you look at somebody like, I don't know, Lewis Hamilton versus Valtteri Bottas. There's not much between them, but Lewis's feel for the car is just that little bit more advanced, that he's able to drive around things that little bit more. And that's nothing against Valtteri, he's still one of the best in the world, but it shows the importance of developing that from a young age and that understanding, isn't it?
Yeah, but the other thing that data doesn't show you is what's going on in your own head.
Yeah.
So you need to brake at that point there, but what are you feeling through the car? But also, what are you thinking? What are your thought processes? Where are you looking? None of that is in the data. That's why a driver coach is so important, really.
Why are you braking there?
Why are you not
braking?
And why are you following this chase?
Exactly. But also, why are you braking 10 metres earlier? What are you concerned about? What are you feeling at that point? Or and so on. So Phil, how would you explain it then, Rich, with if somebody wanted to develop their feel with a car? Now, this could be, obviously we made that sound very track based, but it could be road based as well in this situation. How
the thing is, if you've got a good feel, so feel is about interacting with the car properly, so feeling what the car's doing and recognising things that the car's telling you. So if you're in a road scenario, you'll give your passengers a much nicer ride if you've got a good feel, because you won't be lurching the car, you won't be jumping into the brakes. So things like when people come to a stop, it's quite a classic one, and they just keep the brake on and the car jolts to a stop.
Yeah.
Where somebody with good feel, just as the car's about to stop, they'll fractionally release the brake so the car doesn't jump. That's good feel. So of course, it's on a road car. That it's just a more pleasant ride for everybody.
Yeah, and then on the track, of course, it can make the difference between being first and second, is having that really intimate detail feel with a car, that you can get it dancing on its tiptoes in every single area, and that can be to do with shifting, how you shift, how you go from one pedal to the other, the way you apply the pedals, all of that kind of stuff. Because there's things like Lewis does, which are apparently quite unusual to a lot of other drivers, but it obviously works for him, and it's all down to feel. So really, with anybody to start with, it's isolating each thing, isn't it? And
because you've got to know what you're feeling for. So, for example, when you turn the wheel, there's lots of things happening. So obviously the weight is going to move to one side. So feeling that shift and feeling that settle, but also then the way the tyre starts to create grip.
Yeah.
So feeling for that, that's the kind of thing you're looking for.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you're a Formula 1 driver, it's then about the nth degree of grip on the road.
Absolutely.
But on the road, if you're just driving to the shops, it's the same thing. It's getting that so the car knows what's coming, and you're getting that nice, and you feel the movement.
And somebody who might be a good example here to mention, this is something we do a lot with junior drivers coming up through the ranks, and I was going to call them gentleman drivers, but general drivers, and they don't obviously have to be just gentlemen, of course, when I say that. But it's Rob Wilson, so it might be worth mentioning to everybody some of the drivers he's worked with, what car he uses and what area he uses.
Yeah, well, Rob is an F1 driver coach, and he works with about something like 60% of the F1 grid and half the Indycar drivers and all this kind of stuff. But Rob's big thing is all this about feel and introducing things to the car. And he doesn't use a GT3 or a Ferrari. He uses
or a single-seater.
Like he uses a Vauxhall Astra. And the reason he does that is because it's soggy and soft and has no power. So you've got to do things right. So it won't kill you. It just won't go around the corner the way that you want it to, unless you do things at the right rate and you communicate with the car and listen to what it tells you and all that kind of stuff that we talk about, to manipulate the car to make it go around corners. So of course, when you do that in a Formula 1 car and IndyCar, it's all happening at a different speed, but it's the same principles.
Yeah.
You know, the car doesn't ever want to jump; it wants to know what's going to happen next.
He's worked with people like Kimi Raikkonen, Rosberg,
Valentino Rossi, and all kinds of people.
Big names. Actually, there was a feature on him, and Karen Chandok went out. And bear in mind, Chandok, his experience and knowledge, Rob still managed to find time out of him, and all he uses is a big tarmac space. So point being is, it doesn't matter what level you're at, there is always time to find. And one thing you'll notice with somebody like Lewis is, it's easy to probably say at the moment he is the best, if not one of the best on that grid, but he's always going on about there's more to find all the time. So one thing that we use a lot, and Rob Wilson uses a lot, is something called flat car, which is a state of it being very much in a straight line for as long as possible. And of course, you know, juniors, it's more obvious things to build on and building blocks, but for people that are pros, there are still little gains that can make a massive difference when you're fighting for less than a tenth. So it just proves the point that data is one thing, and data's brilliant. I learned a lot from data, but I wish I had a coach who could help me with that and merge both together. Yeah. It's taken a lot of time and learning in the industry and doing my job to understand the importance of that side of it. And like I say, whether that's on road or track almost doesn't matter. I know you're looking for more perhaps finer details on track, but on the road, if you take pride in driving on the road, and you still want to work with the car and be at one with it and have everything flowing and fluid, don't you, in every possible way. So a lot of the things, you know, work together, don't they? It's just the pace is slower. So what we would say to anybody, especially if they're not already racing, if it's for road, is isolate one thing at a time, whether it's gear changes, you know, what you're doing with your hands, how you're introducing the steering. There's lots of things, but we're gradually doing videos on the channel where we'll go into this more and more and more about feel. And it's something that we've discussed and coached for a long time, but I think somebody like Sarah, being deaf, it just I guess highlighted the importance of feel and how much we rely on it, because as soon as somebody like that who's deaf, who's lost the hearing side as well, you know, the importance of then having only feel, really.
Yeah, well, you have to use other senses.
Yes, absolutely, even more. So so it's something we'd say, but even as an experienced racer, don't be fooled into thinking that data on its own is all you need. No. You know, it's great having it, and these teams work with some great teams, and the knowledge they have and the data they have, the drivers they've had in those cars, there's so much there, which is partly what you're paying for. But it is certainly, I think, for the guys coming up through the ranks, still so important to have that coach to really explain that side of it, the actual feel and communication with the car, rather than the black and white data itself. So so we thought we'd talk a little bit about that today, because it's actually pretty important wherever you are when you're driving a vehicle, isn't it, really?
It is,
So that's it on that little let's say driving
tip
for this week. Okay, so next bit then is motorsport. So which obviously we can waffle on about all day. We're going to start now. It's probably a bit old hat now, but we're going to start talking about the Formula 1, so the Baku Grand Prix. Actually, interesting, before I start on any of this, I've been reading lots of tweets and things of people saying, oh, how boring is Monaco compared to Baku and blah blah blah, it highlights that. But I don't think you can get rid of Monaco. It's such a special place and has so much heritage.
I don't get bored watching Monaco. I just think because it's something special about it.
Absolutely, and I think if you go and watch it for real as well, you'd understand it even more. But I guess Baku has a tendency to have more going on for whatever reason.
It's an epic circuit. It's one of the best circuits in the world.
And you can see that. I've only ever driven it on a sim. I've never driven it in real life. But you can see that, can't you?
An astonishing place. Yeah.
So we'll work through just in a general kind of some of the major teams.
We'll have a look at what everybody got up to.
Yeah, so if we start with Ferrari, because Leclerc, of course, put it on pole.
Yeah.
That's the second pole in the row. Ferrari seem to be stronger. Sainz has done an amazing job to get very close to Leclerc throughout, hasn't he? Straight out the box. So what do you think?
And he had more poles than anybody or something this year. There's some ridiculous stat. He's had twice the poles of Max Verstappen, hasn't he, Leclerc?
Oh, has he?
Yeah, but the Ferraris, I think that Leclerc and Sainz are dragging that car somewhere.
I agree.
It's ahead of itself.
Yeah, well, I've always, as yourself, watched the junior ranks, and Leclerc dominated Formula 2 as a rookie. The only other person I've seen do that in a long time was Lewis Hamilton. Just truly special driver. And I have to admit, I don't think I gave Sainz the credit he deserves. Not intentionally so, it's just he was under the radar for whatever reason. And now he's come over to Ferrari. First of all, it's shown how good Norris is.
Yeah.
But Sainz has got in that car and immediately is bang on the pace. And I think Ferrari are pretty amazed with how strong Sainz has been.
Yeah,
I know he's made mistakes, but hey, it's all a new environment. But pace-wise, it's there, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, he drove brilliantly again. So he made a couple of silly errors, didn't he?
Yeah.
So Tsunoda crashed in qualifying 3 and he kind of followed him up off the road.
Yeah.
And then he shot down the escape road in the race, didn't he?
Yeah.
But other than that, his pace was, it was him and Leclerc. That's how fast that Ferrari goes.
Absolutely.
Because they do the same times, pretty much, don't they?
Yeah. And one
Completely
thing it highlighted is, in a straight line in the race, the car is just dog slow, isn't it? In a straight line. They've
just not quick
got
enough
a good
in race.
chassis.
Yeah.
They've got a good chassis. They've got two of the best drivers on the grid. So great lineup. And one thing with Sainz is he's quite mellow as well, despite how he is in the car, which I think works as a teammate.
Yeah.
So they've got a dream team in many respects. But yeah, race trim, and in a straight line, it's just obvious. Even without DRS. I mean, Lewis went round Leclerc like he was standing still. And
yes, you had DRS, really.
Yeah, yes, you have slipstream, but when you pull out, that slipstream starts to obviously decrease, and it wasn't like that. It was like at DRS, and
maybe it was the bendy front wing that Mercedes say they haven't got.
Yeah, maybe, but yeah. So impressed with the drivers at Ferrari. I think Ferrari themselves still have quite a bit of work to do to get a complete package. I think they're much stronger than they've been for a long time, but they've still got some work to do with that car, haven't they?
Definitely.
So Red Bull then, obviously, interesting story here.
So Red Bull obviously have got, I mean, like you say, Sainz is going to do a good job. Perez, this comes back to something we're going to talk about with McLaren in a minute.
Yeah.
Perez, something's obviously clicked there.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he is banged on Verstappen now.
Absolutely. And one thing with Perez, some people might not know, but he was 5 from Red Bull as a junior driver. I don't know if you want to explain a bit of the background of that.
Well, I think he didn't get much of a run, did he, or something?
Yeah,
that was. Was he ever actually a Red Bull junior?
I believe. My understanding now, anybody please correct us, but I believe he was a Red Bull junior and he was kicked out, but I could be wrong. Perhaps he was going to become a Red Bull junior, but they basically didn't give him any time. He couldn't fit in the car, so he came in to say, I can't fit in the car, and they said, right, off you go. And that was that, very cutthroat. But actually, it's probably one of the best things that could have ever happened to him, to be honest, because under the circumstances, he's been able to build up his experience, the knowledge with different teams, and come to Red Bull with all of that. And
pretty much the complete driver now. He's around Red Bull.
Everybody knows he's one of the best in races. He has this ability to maintain tyres like nobody else, but keep the pace as well, which is a very, very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And actually, in the race, I believe he could have gone past Verstappen.
Yeah.
He had
a slow stop, didn't he?
Yeah, which Christian Horner said it's because he didn't stop in his block. So they have exact markers, and apparently he was slightly beyond that. And of course, when you're talking, minute split, seconds here, it was enough to make it a slow pit stop. So unfortunate for him, but Max, to be fair,
he didn't put a foot wrong, did he? Really did everything he needed to do. He didn't get pole, but that was again because the shunt with Tsunoda and Sainz.
So that wasn't really anybody's fault.
No,
again,
a bit
it was
like
a
what
bit
happened
like
at Monaco.
It's one of those.
But in the race, drove brilliantly. Got round everybody. Red Bull were first and second, and they had it in the bag. And this is the thing that Lewis is going to struggle with: is beating 2 Red Bulls is much, much harder than trying to beat 1.
Yeah, and that's the difference this year, because ultimately, unfortunately, Max, as we probably all know, everybody listening or watching, Max had I'm going to say tyre failure, but Pirelli are apparently saying it's debris. But a lot of the drivers have got together, and it sounds like they're really losing faith and confidence in Pirelli, because basically nobody's buying it.
Yeah.
And you heard Red Bull say, there was no signs of anything beforehand. And normally there would be some signs of debris in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a hard one. Obviously, nobody knows for sure, but we'll talk about Stroll shortly. But obviously there was more than one tyre failure. But hey, they stopped the race. I didn't really understand why they didn't just finish under safety car, and I was worried, to be honest, for Red Bull. Because I thought if they start again, this is going to be Lewis's. Just because of his experience in that car off the line compared to Checo, I thought, this is it.
As it turned out.
Yeah.
It was academic. It was almost like the Baku Grand Prix never happened in terms of points. So again, Mercedes struggled all through practice. And then when they changed the setup, I don't know what they did, but Hamilton, all of a sudden, as he does, there he is on the pace.
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I think
they obviously found a setup that worked for him.
I do. I think it's a combination of things. I think there's a few magic buttons, let's say, that they have for qualifying and races, and I don't think they like to show their full hand. They're constantly saying we're on the back foot all the time. They like to play it down.
They're trying to get themselves as underdog, aren't they?
Yeah, they're trying to play it down all the time, even though the cars. To be fair, at the start of the season was genuinely struggling, but it doesn't seem to be like that now. I think Lewis is very good at working over a weekend, very hard to get the car how he wants. But I do think there's some engine modes or something that they hold back and use. I know they all do to a point, but there's something different because
they're not supposed to do that now, though, are they?
It's so consistent, isn't it? And,
yeah, it is.
That makes it.
It's a pattern that's followed, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, talking about Mercedes in general, what were your thoughts on everything that happened with Lewis, first of all?
Well, so the restart. So we just thought, right, that's it now.
Yeah.
Perez has worked hard all afternoon and he's going to get taken away. So off they go, and Hamilton just locks the front wheels up and shoots down the escape road. Because apparently he has a button on the steering wheel that chucks all the brake bias to the front to warm the for out laps and things like that. You can warm the front brakes. And he caught that. Yeah. So when he hit the brakes, there was no rear brakes, and it just shot up the escape road.
Beforehand, so you think, had he left it on?
Yeah, had he overdone it, or I don't know.
But they called it. Well, he on radio called it a magic button and said, "Did I leave the magic button on, or did I switch it on?" And Bono said, "Yeah, basically, but no."
But he was utterly dejected, wasn't he? He really didn't deal with it at all.
No,
he gave up in the race. He finished like 6 seconds behind Mazepin.
Which isn't him at all.
No.
I've never really, in a long time, he's always got such gritty determination, and I know he can sometimes throw his toys out the pram, but what drivers don't when it goes wrong at times?
Yeah, he operates on the limit.
Absolutely, and the pressure he has on his shoulders. But this time, I think because it was his mistake. Okay, the team don't seem to want to say that. Toto's been very careful with what he says. But ultimately, one way or another, I think it was Lewis's mistake.
Yeah.
And hey, it's human. Mistakes happen, but maybe this shows that he's having to work very hard for a championship this year. I'm not saying he doesn't in other years, but he's got now 2 drivers in one team, which is particularly quick now, pressing and keeping that pressure on consistently now. And the thing is with the Red Bull, it's a very fast car in the race. Checo's now up to speed, and that really leads us on to Valtteri a little bit. Valtteri, I've always been a fan of Valtteri, and I've always stood up for Valtteri. That I think his ability has not changed. That doesn't change. And we'll talk about Sebastian Vettel later with a similar thing to this. Your ability doesn't change, but your mental strength, I think he has been knocked down so much over the years that this is probably the poorest showing we have seen of Valtteri.
Well, he just didn't show up at all. And of course, what you've got then is Red Bull were in this situation until they employed Perez, where Max is fighting on his own.
Yeah.
Well, the weekend we had the complete polar opposite of that.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely, and it made the difference, didn't it?
Because it would have been an easy one too had they not had the tyre failure.
Yeah, and Valtteri, you know, reading from what he's
just nowhere.
He said that you know, he's got some homework to do, but I think it's a mental thing with Valtteri. I really do. Which, hey, I know at the top of any sport, you know, you can't have excuses for people, and unfortunately, I can see him losing his seat at the end of the year. But
there's a theory it's already done, isn't there, with Russell going there?
Well, you know, I think the thing is, I don't want to see Valtteri out of the sport. I want him to have a second chance, a little bit like Sebastian Vettel. I think what's happened is he's worn out trying to beat Lewis, and I think he's mentally fatigued, and deep down he doesn't believe anymore he can beat him. And he might tell people he does, but you know, what you say to somebody, what you really think, and you know, deep down to your core can be different. And I think all the social media pressure, he's also had a lot of you know, negativity on social media, and unfortunately has responded to that, which means he's read it, which won't help his confidence and self-esteem. No. I know he worked very hard over the winter with a coach, didn't he? A mental performance coach. But that isn't something that happens overnight. That's going to take a long time. And I think somebody like Valtteri, he might be in one of the best teams right now, but he needs a fresh start, I think, before you're going to see him, you know, back to what he's capable of doing, let's say.
Yeah, without doubt.
But yeah, so obviously then moving on to McLaren.
Yeah, so as we've come to expect now, strong weekend from Norris.
Norris has impressed me more and more and more. You know, I know Lando is good. I do some sim racing. I know how hard sim racing is, you know, because you have some people that literally, compared to real racing, it's not limited. You are literally in the seat. You could be in the seat 24 hours a day, every day if you wanted to. And he's just amazing on a sim, isn't he? Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Now, I know that doesn't necessarily mean then you have to be that you'll automatically be a great racing driver in real life, because we know people like Lewis says that he doesn't like simulators at all. The most he does in a year is about 8 laps because he has to, but he doesn't like it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that. But I was very impressed over COVID how he performed on the sim. And he's just got stronger and stronger in this team. And he's a very young lad without much experience, but he's really become a team leader of McLaren, hasn't he?
Yeah, not much F1 experience. Obviously, he's a very experieed racing driver.
Well, and he scored points in every round race now, which I think is the only driver to do so, isn't it?
The only person to score points in all 6 races.
So far.
But this highlights to me the ongoing mystery of Daniel Ricciardo. Because we talked about Sainz. Sainz didn't take long to get up to speed with the Ferrari.
Yeah.
Perez is now up to speed with the Red Bull.
Yeah.
Ricciardo's still floundering about, really.
Yeah, and
he's not a million miles away, but he's not on Norris's pace.
He's definitely getting closer. Now, it's really hard to say because, of course, as an outsider, you know, we know from being involved in the sport how much is involved basically with a team, and it could be so many different factors which are just not adding up for him here. It could be the car is so massively different to the cars he's driven before, or the fact that potentially just not bonding with his engineer, or the team mentality is very different, you know, because he competes against people like Max, and so far is still the strongest teammate to Max Verstappen. He's a phenomenal driver. He made Hülkenberg look slow, which is very hard to do. You know, Hülkenberg's a very special, quick driver. So I really believe he is one of the best, but there is something going on. And I don't know what it is. I don't think he even knows what it is, really. I don't think he understands what's going on.
No.
Because hasn't he said before, like, thinks, right, I've put in a good lap, and it's like 13th, and he's thinking, what?
Yeah, he doesn't understand. He doesn't know what to do about it, I don't think. Which is
interesting. I mean, Lando Norris got asked, what's the difference between Sainz and Ricciardo? And he cheekily said, well, Sainz drove round anything. But hey, you really don't know if it's just that the car has, you know, potentially Sainz and Norris drove more alike, or the car's gone that direction. It just doesn't suit Ricciardo, and he's trying to drive around it, but he's, you know, still trying to get his head in with it. But I really feel for him, and I just hope that he can bring this together, because I really do believe in his ability. you don't get to F1 like he has without much money and achieve all that he's achieved without being incredibly good. So something isn't adding up for me.
No.
You know, and I'm not saying there's anything, you know, underhand with McLaren or anything, but there's just something not quite working there. And I'm sure McLaren are shocked. Clearly, Ricciardo's shocked. Everybody's shocked. But he is getting closer. So I'm thinking he's a great racer. So if you can get some, you know, good races in the bag, then I think, you know, that will change his, because a lot of it's the mental pressure, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then I think that will be perhaps a game changer for him, really.
Yeah. Something doesn't add up somewhere with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on to Alpine then. So Alonso obviously he's getting stronger and stronger race by race.
He's getting his mojo back, isn't he?
I don't think Ocon saw where he went this weekend, really.
Well, the thing is, anybody involved in the sport anyway always seems to, anybody I ask seems to say to me he's one of the best drivers that they've ever seen, you know. In general, as an all-round package, he might not be 100% in every area, but he's like 99% in every area, you know, and that's what makes him such a rounded driver. Yes, he's older, yes, he's had time away, but he's always raced. He admitted himself at the start of the season he wasn't up to pace yet, but definitely at Baku we started to see the old Alonso back. You know, he really started to
especially
show
at the restart, because at the restart he was like a, you know, he did like 4 cars, didn't he, at the restart?
He did,
you know, like 2 laps.
And bearing in mind, I think a lot of the people he was jostling with were, you know...
Well, I thought that when they were sat on the grid, I thought this will suit Alonso, because he'll just fire through. Yeah, you know, really aggressive and but really well judged. So it was, you know,
again going back to that feel, he has this amazing ability to feel when it's on cold tyres.
Yeah,
and, you know, conditions are changing and you're going into the unknown. He's very, very good at that. So yeah, I think he gained about 4 places. I think in
he did. Yeah,
2 laps and finished 6th, which was just brilliant. And the Alpine in general, I think, is not as strong as it had hoped.
No.
You know, at the start of the season,
I think they thought it was going to be kind of McLaren sort of area, and it's not quite there, is it?
It's just not quite there yet. But hey, it's still early days. But I think I'm pleased to see Alonso's coming back strong. He's very gritty and determined. And I mean, Martin Brundle said that he's probably one of the top 5 hardest drivers he's ever met. You know. So he won't mess around, that's for sure.
No.
And at the moment he gets a bit more ahead of Ocon, I think Ocon will have his hands full.
Because his head will start to go down.
And hey, we'll see. Like, I could be wrong. I'm not saying there's anything. Ocon's a good driver for sure, and he has had to fight his way to get to Formula 1. So, but I just think Alonso's just an incredibly special driver, and it doesn't matter that he's 40 or you know. It doesn't matter that he's 40, you know. I don't think you suddenly drop off a cliff and can't drive anymore.
No.
You know, as long as you've maintained being in a seat and you're physically fit, that's what matters, you know. But yeah, the AlphaTauri is an interesting story.
Well, they've got a strong lineup now, haven't they? So Gasly was starting to expect. Now it's becoming normal for Gasly to perform, hasn't it?
Yeah,
you know,
and
he was quickest in one of the sessions, wasn't he? And
yeah,
obviously got it to finish on the podium. Amazing job.
Yeah, and I have to admit, Gasly, because he was dicing with Leclerc and Norris, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And in those final 2 laps, I just saw this gritty determination. Of almost he wanted it even more, and of course those other 2 drivers
that's right,
want it badly, but it's almost like ever since he got kicked out the main team, he has been there to prove a point that it wasn't his fault, you know. And I know he's spoken fairly openly about it since, but to be fair, it's not like a flash in the pan. Occasionally he's performing. Every race he is there, isn't he? And I think he deserves you know, a spot in a top team, not necessarily Red Bull, because if things haven't changed enough there, because if you think of Albon and so on for new drivers, then I don't think I know he's more experienced now, but I'm still not sure if it would be the right place to go. But I do think he deserves a shot in one of the top cars, really, because he's just been so impressive. Tsunoda, on the other hand, had a very strong start to the year.
He did, yeah.
He? And then started to make some fairly big mistakes fairly frequently.
Yeah, he did, yeah. Which the team, apparently he was saying to the team, no, I'll sort it out, don't worry, I'll sort it out. And he wasn't really putting the effort in. So they've made him, as somebody said, they've stopped him going to sitting home playing Call of Duty. He's now moved to Italy to work with the team because he was not going to the factory. He wasn't talking to the engineers. And they've made him change his approach.
That seems.
I think as a Red Bull driver, you're sure that they've indoctrinated that into him.
But also, where's the passion for it? I know we all can show passion in different ways, but surely at that level, you finally made it to Formula One. Wouldn't you be doing everything possible? I mean, look what happened to Gasly. And he's actually come back and somehow come back even stronger despite being kicked out of the main team. I mean, Tsunoda's not had any of that. Tsunoda's come in with all the opportunity in the world for him under his feet.
Has it been a bit too easy though? Because I mean, he started racing cars in like 2018. Yeah, it's only 2021.
Yeah, true.
And he's had Red Bull and Honda back in all the way through that. Yeah. So whether he's not had to put the effort in, because that happens. Yeah, that's what happened to Jan Magnussen years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't know how to put the effort in because he never had to.
Yeah, that's true. So he's now in Italy, isn't he?
He's living in Italy.
And basically is being pushed/nurtured into what you need to do, and it's because he's got the pace. Nobody questions that. He's quick. It's just now getting those results, isn't it, and not making those mistakes. Now, to be fair to him, it's his first year in Formula One, but unfortunately, there isn't. Going a few years back, there was more patience for that in general, wasn't there? That was their first year in Formula One. They're allowed to make mistakes. It's become a lot more cutthroat than that. By the time they get to Formula One, they have to already be mature and robust and not making those mistakes and unbelievably fast. The pressure is on them. There's no kind of leeway. So hence why I think he's been put there. But already he seemed stronger off the back of it. So hopefully that's what he needs.
Let's see what happens.
Some focus.
He's an interesting character, and it's
he's quite.
There's fireworks around him, which is quite cool.
Yeah, I like that. He's quite.
He's had to curb his swearing, hasn't he? Because he yeffs and jeffs on the radio constantly.
Which I don't mind. But of course, I appreciate. Yeah, I appreciate it's not for everybody. So of course, the final story really for Formula One is Aston Martin. Yeah,
so Vettel back to being full strength Vettel by the looks of it.
And I just want to say,
brilliant he was.
I told you so. To anybody who said anything, because obviously I've banged on about it already with Valtteri and others, that I do not believe, certainly with Sebastian, that you do not become 4-time world champion just because you're in the right car at the right time. Yeah, that helps, but there's still so much to it. And he's a phenomenal driver, and he has been all through the ranks. Yeah. And I think what happened, and this happened a bit sadly at Red Bull, is when a junior comes in, he seems to struggle with that pressure of a young gun being with him. And the hype around this young gun, and that seems to get his head to drop and fall apart, which is exactly what happened with Leclerc. That's what happened when he was at Red Bull and Ricciardo came in for whatever reason. Whereas he knows Stroll's ability. He's come in, he's really starting to take leadership with this team. He's got so much knowledge and experience with other top level teams to help Aston Martin. And I think at the weekend he just showed his maturity.
Well, they said they were saying in the drove in the race, that he was so gentle with the tyres, but keeping the pace up. Yeah. That he could have gone the whole race on one set of tyres. He was so gentle with management of the tyres. And of course, at the restart, he then drove like Alonso and fired himself up to second place.
And I was so pleased for him.
And the funny thing was, somebody showed a picture of the podium, and it was obviously Perez, Gasly and Vettel, and who they'd all been sacked by.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they'd all been fired.
Three drivers that have been sacked. Yeah. So you've got so Perez was Racing Point, wasn't it? Yeah. Obviously Ferrari for Sebastian, and then Red Bull for Gasly. So it just shows a lot to me how important it is to have the right team around you, but also the mental pressure. A lot of reasons. I mean, it was different with Checo. He did nothing wrong and performed everything he could have, but got sacked for other reasons, let's say, and unfortunate reasons, nothing to do with him. But for the other two, certainly, it's definitely down to mental fatigue and not being able to put that side of it together. And I think we're going to see Sebastian, a bit like Gasly, just perform stronger and stronger and stronger now off the back of this, which will be great to see, I think. Yeah. So just a final note really is tyres then. So really, we'd love to hear from you guys what you think on the whole tyres with Pirelli.
I mean, more information might come out, mightn't it? About that, you know.
Is it a debris or is there failures happening? You know, the fact they were both left rears under load. You know, it'll be interesting to see, especially coming into the next circuit where there's even more load on the car. But I guess by then they'll probably change what pressures they have to run and that kind of thing. But
compound,
you know, we'll see on that one. So Indycar then is another big talking point, isn't it?
So
We've
just
talked forever
briefly,
about we won't go on and on and on about it. I'll let you cover Indycar.
So it's the Indy 500 basically. So the Indy 500, which is probably the most incident-free Indy 500 I've ever seen, really. There wasn't which meant that it was also the fastest Indy 500 ever run. So the average speed over the race broke the record by about 3 miles an hour. So it was just quite a lot over a 500 mile distance. You know? So the sad thing for me was that the guy that we always root for a little bit, Jack Harvey aside, is Connor Daly. Yeah. And Connor, because he never seems to have any luck. He's never got any money. He's never in the right car. And he led more laps than anybody else. And what happened was, the only real incident on track was Graham Rahal left the pit with the wheel undone. Yeah. And as Connor Daly said, a tyre fell out the sky and landed on him. So the only person who, other than Rahal, whose wheel had fallen off the car, he bingoed on the front of his car, didn't it?
And I tell you what, it showed, what do they call them? Because they don't call them halos.
The aero screen.
Aero screen. I'll tell you what it showed, though, is it's probably better than a halo.
I think so.
It literally bounced off the screen.
Yeah, because it's a halo, but it's got then a bulletproof screen. Really.
Yeah, so very, very impressive. But of course, that affected his race massively, and it would, wouldn't it? It would distract you pretty badly. Bearing in mind, you know, their average pace is what over a lap.
230 odd miles an hour. So in the race, they were doing 225s, I think, was the average.
And you have a wheel at that sort of rate coming at you.
And he was flat out when it hit him.
Yeah, you know, it's bound to have an effect. But yeah, what was great was Castro Neves, wasn't it?
Castro Neves, so he's now the fourth full-time winner. So not many people have won the Indy 500 4 times.
And how old is Castro Neves?
40, I think he's 45, 46, yeah.
I thought 46. And the reason I want to bring that up is because I say it every time, but we get a bit too obsessed with age. I think it's great they come in young, but you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be Formula 1, but I think there can be a career, not just in GTs, but in single seaters, you know, a good age. As long as you've kept at it and you're fit and you're quick and you're achieving, why stop? You know, and I think he proved that.
But showing the quality of the the IndyCar field was right behind him was one of the young guns, Alex Palou. Yeah. And Palou said he'd worked out he could get a run on him out of turn 3, I think. Yeah. But unfortunately, they were in lap traffic, so Helio got the tow and that's the thing that's
very different for anybody who hasn't really watched IndyCar compared to Formula 1 is they don't have blue flags.
No.
So what's very, very hard is you come up to a back marker and you have to literally find your way around them. They're not obliged or pushed into letting you go past. So it can really make a difference to a race how ballsy you are at getting through, and you know, bear in mind the pace they're at, how close to the wall they are, you know, all that kind of stuff. That's where experience comes in, and I think that's what showed, didn't it?
Yeah. So it wasn't a great race, but it was a good race. Yeah. It was enjoyable, but it wasn't a classic.
No, because it was a bit too incident free.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot. But I think that some of that is they were talking about fuel mileage. So they'll often go, you know, somebody said you drive 450 miles to a 50-mile race or something at the Indy 500.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
but it's unusual to be so incident free.
You know, there was a couple of incidents in the pit lane.
Yeah,
wasn't there?
People spun coming to the pit for some reason.
Wilson, I don't really know what really happened. It just looked like he came way too fast, locked up, and then lost the rear. But there may have been more to it than that.
Yeah, because Will Power did the same thing but didn't hit anything. Yeah. And then Hunter Ray arrived and couldn't stop. So there was a problem with the brakes.
Absolutely. So it might be more to do with that than actually the drivers themselves, you know. But obviously great for Meyershank Racing. So it's their first win. And they're a very small team, aren't they? Yeah. You know, compared to some of these big teams that they're up against. I feel for Jack Harvey because he does the full season with Meyershank Racing.
And he's worked so hard for them, hasn't he? But he wants to get their first win.
Yeah, and he's had a couple of times now where he's been so close to having the first win, and something awful's happened. And the thing with the Indy 500, the only reason he wasn't anywhere was down to a failure in qualifying.
Tyre failure again.
Yeah, tyre failure in
fell
qualifying.
apart. The big chunk fell out.
Yeah, and it's just like he doesn't get a break, and it's so harsh because he's so fast. And I mean, he's from the UK. When I was doing juniors, he was in cadets, and I watched him go up, and he was with was it Foundation Steps?
Yeah, Racing Steps.
Racing Steps, yeah. That's it. And then they moved him to the States because of, obviously, unless you're a multi-millionaire, over here it's very hard to make a career, certainly in single seaters as well, out of it. So moved him over there, and he's just proved his worth well and truly in IndyCar. But he's just has the worst luck, like he's cursed.
He does, yeah.
It's like, so I really root for him for this next round. That, you know, it just comes together for him because he's got the pace and he just needs it to come together, doesn't he? So that's the end of that section. That's the end of that.
So yeah.
So moving on to our interactive bit of the session. By the way, I love hearing back from everybody. What we will start to do, now it's growing and more people are involved, we will start to read out some things from the week before and that kind of thing. So I don't know if you want to read out the interactive questions.
Yeah, so this week's then, so you've got a racing team.
Yeah.
You've got to pick 2 drivers for that team.
Yeah.
Who are they and why? So it's a single-seater team, so it's not a sports car team. We should do that another week.
Yeah.
We'll do sports cars. So they're going to be, teammates in the same in a car each.
2 names jumped to mind for me, but really because I'm curious.
Yeah.
Now, actually, if I were team manager, I wouldn't do this because I think it'd be a really bad idea, and it would end up with like Prost and Senna, where they'd be firing each other off all the time and all sorts of things. It wouldn't work. But for me, I would love to see Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton together in the same team, because there's this constant question. And Max came out in the week and said, I believe if we're in the same car, I'd always be 2 tenths quicker, which is a pretty big, bold, cocky thing to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Max. I actually almost didn't used to, and really grown to like him as he's matured over the time. And I know that's a big, bold statement. And Lewis is such a complete driver. Yes, he made a mistake. It's very rare for us to see him make a mistake, and he did. But I'd love to see those 2 together, just to honestly see how they'd operate together and who is quickest, and whether there would be things like mind games, that kind of thing. Because obviously when it was Lewis and Alonso, there was a lot of mind games going on. They were clashing a lot. It's almost like 2 balls in one team doesn't work. It's like, for a team, it's better to have one that's clearly just slightly slower than the other.
Yeah. So
you've got a really good number 2 to back them up, but there isn't this constant clashing and, falling out. But for me, I would want to see who's quicker out of those 2.
Yeah, I like that. I think for a similar reason, I'd want either Leclerc and Verstappen, or Leclerc with somebody from the old days, somebody like Niki Lauda, so Niki can set the car up, and then Charles can drive it.
Yeah.
But I think he's probably pretty good at that anyway.
Yeah. So let us know. So if you could pick 2 drivers for we could say Formula 1 team, it doesn't matter, single seaters, IndyCar, whatever. But you were the racing owner, manager, whatever, and you had to pick 2. Who would they be and why? Let us know. I would love to read some out in the next show. So next week. So next week is IMSA and IndyCars from Belle Isle in Detroit. Great.
So we'll let you know what happens there.
Great.
And then the feedback, see what happens.
We'll do a lot more car news next week as well. We got a bit excited about the Richard Burns car thing, didn't we? Which technically isn't so much of a road car, but we will do more road-based stuff as well going forward, because we've had a few people now that really are interested in that bit, so we need to make sure we put some emphasis on that, I would say. It's very easy for us, because we are so passionate about motorsport as well as cars, to end up going off on a tangent, as you could probably tell. So so that is something we will put a bit more focus in for next week's show. And we've also got, as I mentioned earlier, coming up an F1 performance manager, who used to be McLaren's performance manager for, I believe, 14 years, but has been in the industry a long time. So we've got a special episode coming up, but before that we've got Ty Cuthbert which will be released this Friday. So definitely tune in. He's the most likeable, bubbly young lad I think you could ever possibly meet. So yeah, please give it a listen or watch on our channel. Thanks, guys.
Bye.